Okay, why don't we get started? Hello everyone. My name is Sessa Publon. I'm the coordinator for the Baywork program. I'm the one that's been sending out those communications and the reminders. We are so excited today to have Dana Lawson, senior engineer at Central Son, present today. Dana will present interviewing basics for promotional opportunities. And just so you all know, you're all muted. I will be checking the chat and the Q&A. And so we will have time at the end to go and address any questions that people put in the chat or Q&A. Also, this session is being recorded. We will include a recording of this webinar on the Baywork website in the next few weeks. I will send the slides of the presentation to the registered attendees like after the webinar. And then keep an eye out for the chat towards the end of this session, because I will plug our webinar survey. I'll also send a link to the survey to you along with the webinar slides. If everybody could please take a minute to go and fill out the webinar survey. Your thoughts and experience are super important to us as we continue to go and do webinars with our amazing presenters. So Dana, did you want to go and get started?
Yeah, I'll get started here. All right, so hopefully you guys are all in the right session here. I appreciate everyone coming today. I have given this presentation a couple of times and I've had little tweaks as we go because other folks also have suggestions. So hopefully at the very end, if you have any other ideas that you would like to share with the other participants, we'd be happy to hear that at that point too. So let me make sure that oh, there we go. Good. Okay. So when you do start off with looking at applying for a promotion, a new job, keep in mind there's three things that employers are typically wanting to know. Can you actually do the job? That's obviously a huge one. Will you do the job? That's always an interesting one too. Sometimes during the interview process, depending on how you answer things, that could be a concern or not. And then will you fit into the organization? And that they will really get the sense of that as they're doing the interview itself and trying to figure out whether you're going to be a good fit for the team that's already there and what their needs are. So on the application, keep in mind you want to use your personal contact information unless it's an actual promotion at your own employer. Otherwise, don't use your work information there. You don't want them calling your business work or using your business email if you're applying for a position outside of your current agency. Review the position's salary. Don't list a preferred salary outside the position's step range. That's always kind of a little bit of a red flag that the applicant hasn't actually really read the job description and what, as the employer, I'm trying to hire for. You know, I've got a job position and it's $100,000 a year, and yet the person's expecting 150. It just kind of says you haven't really looked at what we're asking for. Don't use abbreviations on your application unless it's an industry standard term. Oftentimes we have lingo within our own organizations that doesn't apply outside of it. And if you start rambling that off or using it within your application, it's not going to resonate with the person reviewing it. Please, please do not copy and paste from your employer's job description or use repetitive answers. It is very obvious if you are copying and pasting. Our job descriptions are written in a way that's not how we would write something. So it becomes very obvious. We want to see from the employer side, the hiring manager, that you've actually taken a look at this and you're providing us relevant answers to your position. Okay, yeah, the chat is working. Great. Okay. Next on that, sorry, I got to get my little mouse going again. There we go. If you have the opportunity when they're asking you a question, give a specific example if you can. This demonstrates that you do have work experience that's relevant to the position that you are trying to apply for, or just that you have experience with, you know, it might be something that's less technical, but it's more a soft skill, you know, customer service related that you can apply from your past experience and that will come with you into this new position. So do give specific examples where possible. And please do not give one-word answers unless it's a yes, no, that they've specifically instructed you to give a one-word answer to. I've seen those before and it doesn't go really well. So as an example, I had this where it was like, describe your experience. Somebody gave me this nice lengthy answer. And then I got this, describe your experience, expert. It doesn't actually tell me that you even know any of that stuff. So don't give one-word answers. This is really your opportunity to get past the application to the interview. So use this to your advantage. Even if they don't ask for one, submit a cover letter. The reason why on this is it really demonstrates your written communication skills, and you may not have that same opportunity within the application itself to demonstrate that, yes, you know how to write a letter. And that you're able to do full sentences with thought and build it all together. So do submit a cover letter, even if it's not required. I do think that that is helpful and useful. Do try to keep that to one page, of course. Couple of key things on this, and it sounds really, really simple, but I have seen people not do this, and it reflects poorly when you don't. Spelling and grammar check. We have it in our word processors. Please do use it. Especially if English maybe is not your first language. You may also just want to ask somebody else to kind of proofread it for you. That can be helpful as well. Or, you know, even if you do have English as a first language, it is still helpful to have someone read it, because I will put typos in my own because I look at it so much. Do customize as well. Use the agency and the address that you're applying for. Reference the correct job title that you're applying for. Nothing kills me more than when people refer to us as a sanitation district and we're not a sanitation district, or they say your company when we're not a company. Use your personal contact information again on that cover letter. Don't do things that are generic, incorrect agency names, job titles, misspelling, grammar, you know, current work contact information. You know, use your personal. For the resume, oftentimes we're putting our applications in through NeoGov and it's not requiring a cover letter or a resume, but I still do recommend using this. It provides supplemental details to verify your job experience, and it is in a more familiar format for hiring managers. If you're older like me, over 40, we are used to still reading that resume, and it kind of gives a little bit easier view of sequencing your work experience and seeing what you've done. So it is a familiar format. I still do suggest doing it even if it's not required. Again, keep in mind, you want to try to keep your resume to one page. If you're a little bit older, more senior in career like me at this stage of my life, 2 pages is reasonable, but you will kind of want to pay attention to making sure it's focused on the job you're applying for. So highlight the employment and the skills that are relevant to the position you're applying for. You don't need to go into detail on positions that really don't apply. So as an example with an actual resume here, if you're younger in your career, you'll often list that education piece up at the top. If you're a little bit more senior in your career, you can list it later on, because your work experience is going to be more relevant to the hiring manager than your degree at that point in time. To save space for a one-page resume, you can cut down your work experience by listing just the position, the title, the employer, and the dates for the older or less relevant positions. It shows that you don't have a gap in your employment history, because if I just left those off, people might wonder, well, what happened between September and March of 2013? So they can see I was still employed, but it's not as relevant to this position or its older experience that I don't necessarily need to focus on. Also consider if there's any key skills that are relevant to the position you're applying for. Often if you're moving up towards a supervisory capacity or a management position, while your work experience is important and sometimes it gets a little bit more technical, it may not demonstrate, that you have these other technical skills. So that's where you can use these areas to kind of demonstrate, yep, I've been in some leadership roles, which looks good when you're looking for a supervisory and management capacity. So keep that in mind on your resume as well. Let's say you get through. Yay, your resume was accepted, your application's been accepted, you've met the minimum qualifications, and they've narrowed it down to the actual interview. So before you go for that interview, reread the job announcement. Keep in mind, what are they looking for? What tasks are you going to be doing, so that you can focus and prepare that your answers are going to be responsive to that actual job. Do a little research on the organization. All of us agencies are organized a little bit differently. Our customer base is a little bit different. Maybe our services are a little bit different between each of us, water, wastewater, combination of those. So do a little research on that organization as well too. Try to anticipate questions. What would the hiring manager ask for this position to understand your qualifications, your experience, why you're motivated for this position, which is potentially a promotional opportunity for you or at another agency? Oftentimes, the first and last questions are about the same. I have seen this a little bit different sometimes, but most of the time they're similar. So usually the first one is always going to be, please briefly describe your background as it relates to this position at this agency. So that's why, again, rereading the job announcement and a little research of the organization is helpful. Your last question is usually going to be something along the lines of, do you have anything else to add for this panel's consideration? On both of those, these you can prepare for because they're usually always there. For myself, I get a little nervous with public speaking at times, but if I kind of have my beginning planned out, it just helps me calm down through the interview process because you already know what you're going to say, and then I get less nervous. But also that last question, you do want to answer that and don't just say, nope, thank you, done. It's your last sales pitch. These are both sales pitches. Why are you the best candidate for this position? Use the opportunities given to you to be able to resell yourself, restate your qualifications, why you're the best fit. They should hire you for this position. There are a bunch of kind of different groups of interview questions. And so you can kind of lump them into these categories. There's going to be experience-based questions. So it might be, have you prepared a grant of easement? Have you done this? Have you done that? And you might be describing, your experience related to these very specific things. It might be one of those questions that is trying to get you to think, do some decision making, some problem solving. It might be an if then. How would you apply this to this? Or how would you handle this type of situation if it came across you in day-to-day work? Some may be more competency based. So they might be getting at, supervisory skills, presentation skills, your project management skills, and some of these kind of overlap a little bit too. Then there's also your behavioral or situation-based questions. And these might come up with, if you had an angry customer, how would you handle this? Or this difficult situation, how would you handle that? Oh, okay. So someone just asked in the chat, sometimes during interviews, I get nervous when asking about salary. How can I assertively do that? If we could hold off on that just a little bit, I'm going to get to some of that towards the end, and I'll try to remember to address this one there too. All right, next slide. There we go. Okay, so for your interview, do practice. It definitely helps you. Assume that each question you're going to have 5 minutes or less to answer. So this just kind of helps you to pay attention. Don't ramble. Give yourself a little clock or a timer when you're practicing. Where you can, try to control your nervous tics. We each have them. There's the twirling of the hair, tapping the foot, tapping your pencil. As best you can, try to practice controlling these. And that's where practicing with someone else can be helpful because they might be able to identify these for you where you're so used to them, you don't even see them anymore or notice yourself doing them, or record yourself with your phone. That can work well too to get an idea of what these are. Once you're aware of them, it'll be a little bit easier to control them. The reason why is this will distract the panel from your answers. You want to try to have, as best you can, a comprehensive, well thought out answer. And if you throw a bunch of ums in there, it distracts from it. So again, practice with yourself. You can use a mirror. You can record yourself on your phone, since you can all stick it on that little selfie mode these days, with a friend, coworker, a partner. Kids, they might get bored of you, but you could practice with your children too. But the more you do it, it just makes it a little bit easier when you get to the interview that you already have an idea formulated that you'll be able to twist based on the actual questions that they ask you there. So some basics for the actual interview itself: be on time. Make sure you got buffer for traffic, getting parked, walking to the lobby, checking in, signing in, that kind of thing. Be on time. If you're running late, it's really going to throw you off for that interview too. You're going to be more anxious. Do dress appropriately. So business casual as a minimum. Please do not overscent yourself. I've been through interviews where people are heavily overscented. It is very distracting for the panelists as well. When you are entering and exiting that interview, make eye contact with the panel, greet them, thank them when you leave, shake hands. It gives a good first and last impression. And it also might kind of help you to ground yourself with that interview as well. If it's an external panel, so this is kind of where that salary question comes in. If it's an external panel, save the agency or job specific questions for the next round. The external panel is not going to be answering questions in regards to the salary or anything that you potentially want to negotiate on there. It's obviously just not within their authority or their knowledge to be answering that. So keep that in mind. Oftentimes, a lot of these first interviews are virtual now. We have this capability as the public agencies. We got pushed into this with COVID, thank goodness. But some things to pay attention to during that virtual interview. Test your devices. Even today, when I was getting logged on to Zoom, it wanted to do some updates. So I was rather glad that I started logging in 10 minutes early because it had to do an update. So test your device, your meeting platform, Zoom, Teams, whatever it happens to be. Make sure your camera and your microphone are working and your internet connection. Mine's been blipping out at home, so I just switched internet providers recently, but that could be something you want to pay attention to as well. Set the stage. Make sure there's lighting on your face. I've had ones where the person's backlit, there's a window behind them, and you really can't see them very well on the interview. That it just doesn't reflect well. So pay attention to your lighting. If you can, remove background distractions. Some of them you have the ability to blur your background like I have today. That can be helpful. If not, pick a room where maybe it's a fairly blank wall behind you or there's curtains, so there's few distractions. Lock the children and the pets out of the room. Silence any other electronics. If you've got your cell phone sitting there, put it on silent, move it out of the room so that it's not distracting from the interview. Also, again, still dress appropriately. They're going to see you from the top up. Make sure it looks professional within that too. When you get to the actual interview, yay, you've made it. Excellent. Keep track of time. Usually at the beginning, they're going to give you already know how long the interview is going to be, 30 minutes. Oftentimes, the HR person sitting in there or whoever's kind of starting off the interview on the panel is going to say, we have 10 questions we're going to ask you over the next 30 minutes, or they just tell you 10 questions. You know how long it's going to be. Do the quick math in your head so you get a sense of how much time. If you find yourself starting to ramble, stop yourself, sum it up so you can move on to the next question. Listen carefully to understand each question. Organize your response. I've had some folks who come into it and they're so focused on their sales pitch, they don't actually answer the question I've asked, and they've repeated themselves multiple times without actually answering the question. It doesn't reflect well on you on that interview. Again, answer the question that's being asked. You can try to slip in some other skills and things, to help sell yourself, show your skill set, but make sure you're still answering the question that was asked and you didn't just go off on some other tangent. Sell yourself honestly. You can be tactful about things, but this is a sales pitch. You are trying to show that you have the skill sets, but you can do it honestly, and that's a-okay. Be confident in your answers, but pay attention and don't digress on your answers. Kind of watch that panel. It's a little harder when it's virtual. But when you're in the room with the others, you can get a sense of if you're rambling or losing track of time, if you're kind of paying attention to your audience there, your panelists, for the nonverbal cues. For situational questions, as best you can, give specific examples from your experience. This really shows that you have experience or that you can take your experience and apply it in a slightly new way to grow into this new position that you're applying for. If you don't have specific examples, you've not actually been in that situation, that's okay. Then demonstrate your ability to think through the situation. Well, I haven't had this before, but if I had an angry customer coming in, yelling and screaming at me, I would likely do X, Y, and Z. It shows that you have the ability to think through the situation. That actually reflects very well on you. None of us have jobs that are exactly the same day after day. We do have to have experience and knowledge. We have to be able to adjust to the situations. This is an opportunity to demonstrate that. For the final interview, oftentimes it's going to be a series of two. That first one's with an external panel, and then the final interview is going to be narrowed down. It's very similar to the first one in the sense of be on time, dress appropriately, do the same thing when entering and exiting, making eye contact, shaking hands, thanking them, greeting them. This final interview really is for fit. Do you fit the team, the work culture, the near-term assignments? You are not necessarily going to know that because you don't currently work there. You may not know the work culture. Oftentimes, the near-term assignments that might be in the job announcement. So that's why it's good to reread that job announcement in there. If you might know somebody at that organization, you could maybe go out to lunch or coffee with them or give them a call and just try to get an understanding of, what is this team? What is this work group I might be applying for? What's the work culture there? That could also kind of help you with this. This is also usually your opportunity to ask questions. So that question about, salary, this is usually where you're going to have that opportunity to ask about salary. So how can you do that assertively? Usually for most jobs, there's going to be a salary range when it's a public agency and it's already published. So with that, what that range is going to be. The issue that's going to come up is if the position maybe has a wider range and your current salary is someplace in between and you don't want to start with a detriment. That's usually more where you're going to be asking about salary because public agencies, it's going to be known. It should be in the job posting what the salary is. Even for private companies, they usually do post that. Sometimes with higher up management positions, it might be a little bit differently. Really on this is work. This is a job. You are being paid to do work. My grandpa always said, if it was fun, they wouldn't pay you for it, which is true. So don't take it that it's more of a personal thing that you're asking them. Just be matter of fact about it, and that might help. All right. Now, let's say you are getting to that job offer. So this is, again, where that salary stuff comes in. Research your total compensation. What's the salary that's offered? What's your vacation sick leave accruals? What's the retiree income comprised of? Your retiree medical benefits, other benefits. And these are, not monetary, but could have a big difference in terms of your work-life balance. Is there approved commute, flexible schedules, telework, wellness programs, or the opportunity for mobility, promotional opportunities within the organization? So these things, pay attention to them because there's a certain amount that there might be some flexibility, there may not be some flexibility. You also get yourself very worked up for these interviews. And at the end of the day, if the total comp isn't what you're looking for, you've kind of just put yourself through a lot that maybe you didn't need to do. When you get to that job offer, what is negotiable and what is not? The starting step in your salary range may be negotiable. Some agencies may consider this, but it's got to be justified on your current position at your current agency. You can't be asking to start at the top range if you can't justify it really by your current salary. I don't see anyone looking favorably on that. Same thing with the accrual level for vacation. If it's justified by your current position, they may start, instead of starting you at accruing at 2 weeks a year, maybe they'll let you start accruing at 3 weeks a year. These sort of things are usually going to be more negotiable when you're higher up, a little bit more senior or a management type position. If it's an entry-level position, unlikely that these are going to be negotiable. Telework, that is something that we see nowadays on this. If the position allows it, telework may be available, but usually it's after a probationary period because you do need to have some understanding of your work assignments, feedback with your new supervisor. So don't expect telework is going to start on day one, maybe, but probably not. If it's a promotional opportunity within your agency and you've already proven yourself and you've been past that initial entry-level probation, it might be considered, but keep that in mind too. And maybe something that it's a benefit you can get later once you've proven yourself. Things that are not going to be negotiable: your salary range, the high and the low. Well, you're never going to want lower, obviously, but the high end of that salary range is not going to be negotiable. Even if you're applying for a position at a private firm, oftentimes that salary range is still set based on their job titles. There's usually not going to be much wiggle room with that, but certainly not at a public agency. They cannot offer you a salary that's outside of the published salary range for that position. Sick leave accrual, again, that's going to be something that's really not negotiable. It's one of those benefits that's been defined in the MOU for the entire union, whatever that bargaining group is. You're not going to be able to negotiate something different than what's in the MOU. If it is a management position or something that's unrepresented, that could be a different situation. But most of the time, you're not going to be able to negotiate benefits different than those MOUs. Let's say you don't get the job. Bummer, but if you're not offered the position, ask for feedback. This can be helpful for the next time you're looking for a position. Always take those opportunities when you can, get that constructive, criticism, take that, apply it, and figure out how can I improve myself for the next time I interview. Also seek other opportunities for professional development. Some ideas on that, if you have a hard time in the interviews, and some people do, they're great on a one-on-one, you stick them in front of an audience or even an interview panel and they freeze up. That's that public speaking. Also, selling yourself can be very uncomfortable. So give yourself an opportunity, public speaking, Toastmasters. That's a great one. There's a lot of local chapters of that you can utilize to help improve your public speaking skills. Or community college programs, they also have public speaking you could take as a night class. Leadership opportunities. Let's say you're in a position where you don't supervise, but that's really your next goal on your career ladder is to move into a supervisory position. Well, how can you get yourself some leadership experience that you can't get in the workplace? Look at other organizations, East Bay Municipal Engineers, CWEA, other organizations like that. You might have some within your own organization. We have safety teams and they have chairs. So that's obviously an opportunity within your organization to kind of practice some leadership that's not directly related to your job itself. People skills. Youth coaching. I did a lot of sports coaching. I did a lot of sports in my youth. And then as I got older, I turned into coaching. That's a good opportunity to deal with people skills, between the kids, their parents, the coaches, the referees. You got a lot of opportunities to learn and develop with that too. And it's very much can be applicable to the workforce later on. So these are all opportunities. Other volunteering opportunities at nonprofits, again, will help develop those people skills. And those people skills are a little bit more challenging. You don't learn that in college. You don't learn that in school. You don't learn that in high school, not directly from the classes. You learn it from other activities in your life. So this is an opportunity to stretch yourself a little bit there. All right, we're pretty much to the end here. So does anybody have questions? And if you don't have questions, maybe you have some other thoughts or suggestions for the group at large that could be helpful.
Yes, thank you so much, Dana. So Robin Jones has her hand raised. Robin, I gave you the ability to talk, but your mic is muted, so I'll have to unmute first. Robin,
Okay, so maybe I'll just go to the question that's in the chat at the moment. So they said, what can you tell us about thank you letters after interviews? I think they can be helpful. It's not necessarily going to sway someone if you're not the right fit for the agency, you're not the right fit for the position, it's not necessarily going to change things. It does, though, show that you have good people skills. And if you are, in their view, a candidate for the position, I think that can look good. But with the interview itself, the panelists will have been required to provide their scoring usually that same day at the end of the day. So thank you letters after the fact aren't necessarily going to be taken into account in terms of the scoring or the ratings. But it's not a bad thing to do. And if nothing else, it's a good practice for yourself, that public written skill. Also, you could always, it gives you an in to, if let's say you don't get the next round interview, to maybe ask for some feedback once you find that out. But I have gotten thank you emails and letters. When it's an outside panel, it's more of just your professional networking. it's not going to help you towards getting that position because it was an external panelist. I'm not necessarily going to, call back the other agency and say, oh, quick, change my score from yesterday. But it's still good people skills to have, certainly. All right. I don't see anything else in the chat at the moment. Hold on. Let me switch over to the Q&A. Yep. I was just going to pop over to that. So let me go back to the Q&A real quick. And then I saw Mila just put something. So I'll go back to that. So one question we had, so what is your opinion on bringing handwritten notes into an interview? I think that's okay. You can do it. Just as much as you can practice ahead of time. If you're stuck going back to your notes to answer something, it's going to eat into your time in your presentation to the panel. So it kind of lends to there. Having some handwritten notes to just keep, if they're really just bullet points to remind yourself about things that you can quick glance at it, A-okay. I would just be cautious of having too much notes. If you've ever watched someone give a presentation or a speech and they're doing index card by index card, you'll understand what I mean when you say it doesn't flow as well, when you're really stuck on that. So as much as you can, keep it to bullet points just so you've got some highlights for yourself, and maybe more so for those first and last questions where you want to hit on a couple of key selling points about yourself, or if you just want to remind yourself about a couple of big projects to use as those specific example references when you're answering a question. So keep those sort of things in mind. We have another question on here who says, who can I ask for feedback after the interview? Good question. Sometimes first contact are HR folks, but the interviewers are actually managers or people within the area that the position is being filled. Usually most agencies are going to want you to go through HR, and you're not going to have contact information for the interview panelists. What I have had happen is I've had HR ask me, hey, would you be okay if we provided your contact information if somebody would like more feedback? I've said, yes, that's usually fine with me. I don't have a problem with it. Other times HR has asked us at the end, do you have any feedback in case the interviewer asks us for feedback? In that case, they're usually going to share it with you. But yeah, usually that contact's going to be the HR folks, and you could just say, hey, it would be helpful. Would you mind asking them to provide some feedback? Again, you're kind of at their whim or their ability to do this, but it doesn't hurt to ask any on that. Oh, this is an interesting one. What is your opinion on using AI generated responses for job applications? I personally have never tried or used that. My concern would be it's coming off as, I guess it depends on how it's written. Is it in your words? My other concern with this is as much as you're using an AI generated response, it might do well on the application, but when you get into the interview, you're not going to have that tool there to use. And if you get the job, that doesn't mean you can do the job. So I would be very cautious about using AI generated responses because it's not actually you. And you are the one who's actually going to need to do the interview and do the job at the end of the day. So I would be cautious about that. Like I said, I've never actually used it, so I don't know how it looks, but I would just really caution you on that. All right, next question down. How do you deal with ghosting during your recruitment process? Honestly, I'm just going to say I'm really, really sorry if that happens to you. Couple of things, though, is when you're first submitting your job application, sometimes it's a lot. And the HR is usually going to screen for minimum qualifications first. Not all HR agencies are going to personally get back to you and say you didn't make it. I think a lot of them are using the online systems like NeoGov. So there's probably the opportunity within that it's sending out a notification that you didn't make it past, say, the application stage. Usually the ghosting is because ghosting most likely really is you didn't get the position, either because you weren't the one they were going to hire, or two, something happened with the recruitment that fell through entirely. And maybe they didn't get the candidate pool they wanted, funding changing, or they decided to go a different direction. And so somebody dropped off notifying everybody. I don't think there's a whole lot you can do about it. You can certainly call them and ask and see where it's at in the recruitment process. And maybe they did adjust and they let you know that. I don't know that there's going to be anything to actually get the job if that's occurred to you, because probably something happened on the organization's end that has changed. Next question. Do you have any suggestions for negotiating salary for an internal position? Ooh, the negotiating is hard. The only thing, like I said, you can usually negotiate on is just not downgrading your current salary. So if the position is going to be wherever you're at now, you need to move into a C step so that you stay even with your current salary. That's the best negotiating you're going to be able to do, to say, hey, I'm, earning such and such right now at this step. In order to move into this position, I would really like to be hired at this step so that I don't lose anything for my take-home salary. That is usually going to be, most of the time, justified and well received. But if you are at a much lower level and you don't have that to say, this is going to be a detriment to me, you're probably not going to have a lot of room for negotiating that salary for an internal position. Unless, like I said, you can just justify it based on your current salary amount. So I don't know if anyone else has thoughts on that, but I don't think you've got too much more opportunity with that, just because public agencies, our salary schedules are published and very well transparent. All right, I'm going to pop back over to the webinar chat. We had a question there that says, do you have any tips on how to manage nerves during an interview? More than anything else, practice ahead of time. Practicing ahead of time is probably going to be what calms you the most, because you will have some ideas already thought out in your mind to answer the interview questions. You will have reviewed the job description, the organization. You will have thought about, how does my resume, my skill set apply to this position? It should help you to practice a little bit and then go into that interview, because I wouldn't say it's canned responses, but you've thought through some of the possible questions ahead of time, so you can adjust on the fly a little bit more what your answers are going to be, because it's already fresh in your mind. The other nerve issue that comes up with interviewing is really just that public speaking aspect of it. And that's where more advanced planning on doing some public speaking practice ahead of time, Toastmasters. Also, just if you have the opportunity at work to give a presentation, volunteer for it. I know that sounds nerve-wracking, but some of this is just doing it over and over, where you're like, okay, it's not going to kill me. This isn't fun, but I can get through it. Next question. Any tips on how to answer an interview question you don't know or not sure? I think one, you can be honest and just say, I'm not really sure, but then try to go into, but here's how I think it would be. If the question is maybe you're not sure about the answer because the question's worded a little awkwardly, you could always ask them for, can you clarify the question a little bit more? So you can ask that. Sometimes, during the interviews, we will have that happen where it's worded a little awkwardly, and after the first two, everyone kind of stumbles on it, and then they get a little bit better at helping to rephrase it for the next interview candidates. But if you honestly don't know, I would really just say, I'm sorry, but I don't know. I don't have any experience with that yet. Be straightforward. It's a little bit better than just kind of bumbling through an answer and rambling on and on. I think I've gotten through everyone at the moment. Let me just move my little bars here. Okay, I think I've gotten through all of those. And Stacey, do you want me to turn it back over to you?
Yes. Thank you so much, Dana, and thank you to everyone who asked questions. If you do have any other questions, we do have time, so please feel free to go and put it in the Q&A or in the chat. But I did want to go and bring your attention to our webinar survey. I've just put the URL in the chat. It's your thoughts, your experience are just super important to us as we build more webinars with our amazing presenters. So please take a minute to fill it out today. I'll also email you a link after this session. But if anybody has any other questions for Dana, then we can go and address those as well. So. Okay, so it looks like we don't have any other questions, but
Looks like there was just one more that just popped into the Q&A real quick. So it says, in your opinion and based on your experience, what overall suggestions would you give the people going through this process? Overall, really, it's practice. And then also just thinking about your own professional development and where are your strengths and weaknesses and where can you just on a day-to-day basis help to improve your skills, especially if you're wanting to move up to another level. So those presentation skills, any sort of leadership type roles, if you're trying to move up in the organization, find some stuff outside of work. It just gives you a longer practice time to build your skill set to move to the next level. So those would be my biggest ones, practicing for the interview, and then trying to just get day-to-day, professional development into your overall life and just look at those opportunities where you can stretch yourself a little bit more. All right, I think that is it at the moment.
Okay, awesome, awesome. So, as I noted earlier, the session was recorded. We will post it on the Baywork website in the next few weeks. I will also send you the slides to the today's webinar, in addition to a link to the webinar survey after the session. But yes, and then Dana, are you on LinkedIn as well?
I am on LinkedIn. However, I will admit I'm not real great about the social media, but if you do want to reach out to me on there, go for it. I just may not see it for a little bit. So I'm going to apologize in advance for that.
Well, that's totally cool. I mean, I can't even remember the last time I checked my LinkedIn messages either. But yeah. Thank you for letting us know. But yes, so thank you all so much for joining us today. Dana, if you wanted to go on, stay here for a minute or two to if anybody has.
Yeah, I can sit on for a few more minutes in case anybody else has questions. No problem with that, or say if you need anything
Okay.
else.
Cool. Otherwise, the webinar has ended. Dana, I want to go and thank you for presenting this again. As I said, I wasn't able to watch this during last year's training buffet, so I'm glad I was able to sit in on this time. And thank you to our attendees for joining us today. Keep an eye out for more communications from Baywork regarding more of our webinars. Just to give you a heads up, we are putting together a speed mentoring event that will most likely take a virtual speed mentoring event that will most likely take place sometime in April. So once we secure the details for that, we will go and let everyone know. But thank you all so much, and yeah, enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you so much. That was a great session, Dana.
Good. All right, I see actually there was one more that just got put into the Q&A. So what is your advice for managerial position interview in which you may not be as good as the other contestants in terms of technical aspect of the prospect section? I think in a lot of ways we do have to stretch ourselves, right? And so while you may not be the best candidate, it's showing that you're wanting to move into that realm, and it's still good practice for you to interview. I've applied for a couple management positions, haven't gotten them yet. And it's disappointing. Oftentimes I feel like, oh, I'm a good candidate for it, but then the feedback you get is we had other people more experience. There's not a whole lot you can do about that. If someone has more experience than you, they have more experience than you. But do try to be confident in your answers. Show your willingness to learn, your willingness to push yourself. Try to stretch on what your experience is. Sometimes the management experiences or management positions is much more people oriented. It's going to be more political. I'm an engineer, nerdy engineer, yay. I have moved up where I do end up having to deal with some of the political and people side of things. And so that's been a stretch that I've had to learn over the last number of years as well, too. And so that is really where that experience comes into play. And somebody else may be a better candidate because they have more of that experience and they've been in more touchy situations where they've had to deal with the politics. And so when they're able to answer those interview questions, they can actually draw upon an actual real life example that maybe I haven't been able to do yet. And so they're a better qualified candidate for me. I would say really just don't give up. Don't be too discouraged. If you don't get that first position you're applying for, that's okay. As we're moving up, that pyramid gets a lot less. There's a lot fewer management positions than there are lower level, entry level positions. So it's going to be much more competitive as you move up. I think you can feel good about the fact that you felt qualified to apply for it. If you got invited to an interview, they thought on paper you had the qualifications. So all of that should help kind of boost your confidence a little bit. And just don't get too discouraged on those. I don't have a great answer for it. You know, they are going to be looking for who's the best fit for them at the time. Every once in a while, you'll have an organization that sometimes maybe wants someone who they can groom into the position, and maybe they'll take that into account as well. So that willingness to learn, to take direction, to, you know, mold yourself to fit into that organization. Sometimes people come in with very defined opinions, and if you're very defined, maybe that's not what they're looking for. So it can kind of go either way on that one. It's not the best answer. Sorry. I think that I don't see anything else popping in there on the chat or that. And I think we've probably dropped off everybody. So thank you, everyone. We appreciate your time today, and Cesar for organizing this. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Dana. And after the survey results come in, Dana, I'll go and send you and I'll send you the survey results. So,
certainly.
yeah.
Thank you.
So maybe I'm guessing about like next week I'll send those over. Yeah.
No rush.
Okay, awesome. Well, so the session has ended. Everyone's free to go, and yeah, hope to go and see you at another Baywork event soon. Dana, I hope to go and like see you present at another event soon, because even though I'm not an engineer or like really in the industry aside from Baywork, I just learned so many things that are applicable, I think, for any job seeker. So thank you.
Glad I could help a little bit.
Okay, thank you, Dana. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.